Welcome to Manage Your Damn Money with Ben and Malcolm, where we trade in personal finance advice for entertaining conversations about money, millennials, and the young at heart. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money, where we are here returning on my favorite show about money. I am your co-host, Mr. Ben Carter, and I'm joined here by licensed financial advisor, Malcolm Ethridge. What is happening, sir, today?
Another day, another dollar. All that good stuff.
We got to get you a new intro.
Maybe not. You know what? I'll just be glad when tax season is, when April 15th comes and tax season is done, I'll have a little more energy for you.
Indeed. Something that's hilarious that I feel like I never really share much about on this show, the comedy of raising triplets.
Oh my God, I'm sure.
Legitimately, and this was last night and what's in the instance I'm referring to, it's not even the kids. Mm-hmm. It's just all the adults involved. There's always like drama and emotions and opinions, and it's just like, where is our reality TV show? Like, legitimately.
Do you count in that grouping of all the adults with all the drama?
Who count who?
Do you count yourself?
Not really.
I figured you were going to say something like that. I figured.
I don't think I'm included per se.
Okay.
Who's the woman that produces all the like scandalous?
Mona Scott.
Mona Scott.
Oh, I hate her.
Somebody called Mona Scott. We got something for you. I knew it was something Mona something. I couldn't
Y'all
remember.
gonna be flipping tables and throwing drinks, and the babies like just sitting there looking at the cameras.
Legitimately, the other night, somebody got mad at me for something I did at church that I thought was trying to help the situation. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, and this is the result of, I basically was getting fussed at in my own house about something I did at church.
Okay, and now we're gonna move on so you don't get fussed at when you get home, because I know your family listens to the show.
In this instance, I think I'm safe.
Okay.
But anyways, it's a lot of comedy that goes on at the house, and we need some cameras there to share the comedy with the world. But as we do on every show, it is now time for headlines. Here's a nice, hot, juicy one, Malcolm. Should you marry someone who's deep in debt? This was a February 2020 piece on HuffPost.
You're just stirring the pot today.
Yes, all around. It was on HuffPost.com by Casey Bond. The question at hand, would you marry someone who's 6 figures in debt? Josh Hastings, a 32-year-old teacher and blogger, did just that in 2016. His wife, Laura, racked up $300,000 in student loans to become a physical therapist. That's really expensive. I feel like, anyway.
Medical school is expensive.
Okay, well, but Hastings wasn't exactly free and clear either. He had about $40,000 in student loans once he graduated, plus a mortgage on a townhouse. Even so, the couple decided to get hitched. They figured that Laura's salary in the medical field would be high enough to eventually pay off everything, but that's not to say these huge numbers didn't give both of them pause. A 2019 YouGov poll commissioned by Linkey Technologies found that more than half of respondents said the debt load of a prospective spouse would be a factor in tying the knot. Of the 1,000 respondents, only 4% said student loan debt would be a deal breaker, while 11% said credit card debt was a bigger issue. Nearly 1/3 of respondents between the ages of 18 and 34 said they would or had postponed marriage due to debt. Malcolm, so a question for you. What does it tell you about our generation that it's using debt levels as a means by which to select a spouse?
There's so many things involved in there. Like, on one hand, you could say it's discrimination and classism, right? If I'm a person who's so fortunate that I could go to college,
oh my God,
and let me finish, and then you render your opinion.
Go ahead.
If I'm so fortunate to be able to go to college that my parents have paid for, let's take scholarships out of this. Say my family was well off enough that they paid for me to go to college. That means that I'm only willing to marry a person who comes from such means too, not a person who had to borrow to go to college to better themselves.
Pull themselves up.
Which means that two people who come from families who have means enough to pay for their kids' college education in full are the people reproducing, and their offspring then decides to do the same thing, and the haves get havier, and the have-nots get have-notier. That is why I say discrimination and classism. That's one instance of how that comes into play here in my mind. Now, what say you? Now that I've given you my justification.
The thing that I actually think about is how marriage, this is not going to be what you, I don't think you're going to think this is what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it. Marriage in America has become this romanticized thing, but in truth.
Oh, you dying to get in trouble. Okay.
No.
I'm listening.
Wait a minute. I'm just saying from a historical standpoint, like, what do you have to do in other cultures? In some cultures, you have to do what before you get married? You have to give what is called a dowry, right? You have to show some financial investment in the other family by saying, I want to marry your daughter or whatever. Here's some money or here's a cow or whatever it is.
I don't know what year this is you're talking about.
I'm just saying. And then I'm thinking of the Middle Ages, right? Like, medieval times.
I thought you meant like 1996. The Middle Ages, medieval times is where we are?
That's where I'm trying to draw on, there are eras in human history where who you married wasn't based on who you loved, but based on social hierarchy and standing.
Okay.
Or I should say socioeconomic hierarchy and standing.
Right.
And I'm simply saying that this is actually closer to that, and the whole notion that you marry who you love and who you fell in love with, Lady and the Tramp and all that, that's a bunch of, as you would say, malarkey, isn't it?
Lady and the Tramp?
I'm just saying.
Oh, you have little girls at home.
Listen, my little girls are not watching old Disney movies. Okay? Old Disney movies all say the prince is going to save you, and I completely disagree with all of that. Anyways, let me not get off.
Because that prince can pay that dowry.
Indeed, he can. So does it say anything that, like, how scarred the millennial generation is?
Well, that's the other place that I was going to go with it.
Okay.
The fact that that's a dynamic that our generation has to consider that our parents and grandparents didn't.
Right.
So, I might have fallen in love with this person.
Right.
And we got so deep into it that I was like, I could see myself married to her. It'd be cool.
Right.
But then we took it a step further and got into the conversation about balance sheets. And all of a sudden I realized that she had, say, $100,000 in debt. I'm going to think about it a little bit differently. Like, all of a sudden that the air gets let out of that romance balloon a little bit. And now I'm thinking like you saying, I don't know. I got to go back and do the math on this.
Well, the article continues on and says, when deciding whether to pop the question or agree to a proposal, it's important to consider how debt can alter the relationship. From a legal standpoint, bringing debt into a marriage doesn't mean the other spouse becomes liable for it. That remains the responsibility of the person who accumulated it. However, marriage is about becoming a team and accomplishing goals together, and debt will undoubtedly impact your ability to accomplish certain things as a couple, which is true. So, Malcolm, have you ever heard of someone holding out on marriage because of student loan debt?
Not necessarily holding out on marriage, but I have heard of people deciding not to pursue any further in the dating phase because they found out about substantial student loan debt.
Wow.
And
I'll
also,
one instance, or like,
this is 2, maybe 3 classmates of mine who found out that the other person they were interested in, they met however they met. And
guys or
when
girls?
they got enough, all women.
Wow.
When they got deep enough into the conversation to find out the person's balance sheet, they were like, I'm not interested in taking on that debt. So here's the thing I'll say, though, from that perspective. I've shared with you on the show that my wife and I, the house that we bought, we would not have been able to buy that house if we had student loan debt. Okay. We'd have been able to buy a house, just not the one that we bought that we love.
Right.
So that matters in that sense, that if either of us had, say, $50,000, $60,000 in student loans, we wouldn't have been able to get the house based on that debt to income ratio and all those other factors that go into it. So it matters.
Right, yeah, it does.
So, I get it,
I have to ask another follow-up question on that situation. Are any of those young ladies married now?
I'm not going that deep.
You're not
into,
going that deep? All right. I just wanted to ask.
I see where you're.
Curiosity
but
kills.
Too many people I know listen to this show, and I don't want to give any more details than,
Indeed. Well, another question for you. You kind of described one just with you and your wife in the house. What would be some of the other benefits of marrying someone with debt, but who you truly felt like you loved and like wanted to be with forever?
I guess you just laid it out. Like, the benefits themselves are the intangibles. Right. It's the romantic side of it, not the financial side of it.
Right. And then the flip side of that, what are the drawbacks of marrying someone with like a significant amount of debt?
How much time do we have left? I mean, so you kind of alluded to it in the lead up to this. The thing that would matter more to me is sizable credit card debt. So having, I said 50,000 as my example of student loan debt that may have precluded us from being able to buy a house.
Right.
Marrying somebody with $50,000 of credit card debt would be more of a problem for me than $50,000 of student loan debt. Because one of them is to better yourself and to get you further along in life than you would have been had you not taken out those student loans to get that education.
Which is respectable.
The other one, who knows what you spent that money on, like blowing money fast with Rick Ross down in Miami somewhere and not on anything actually like practical that's gonna help you progress. So that would be more my concern.
Right. There is certainly in that instance a tier of debts, Malcolm. But I can't help but think about, and this, at least for me lately in doing this show, something I've been thinking about and focusing on, is the impact the Great Recession of 2008 has had on the millennial generation in general.
Come on, somebody.
Well, I don't want to start going there and start preaching, but the impact that experience and that moment in economic times had on our generation, such that now we're talking about you selecting a spouse based primarily or any degree on what amount of debt someone's bringing to you. Like how kind of twisted that is.
Whoa. Since these medieval times that you're talking about, people have been selecting their spouse based on some superficial criteria or another, at least to some degree.
Okay.
So whether this person is a 9 out of 10 looks-wise, for example, or if this person has, significant income and/or assets already, all those kind of things have always gone into this factor historically.
So not all is lost.
So we've just shifted it from how much student loan debt do you now have versus, how attractive is this person versus the next and the next. So, there's always going to be some kind of grading scale or criteria that a person uses to determine like who makes the cut and who doesn't.
I'm still wondering whether or not these three people have gone on to find happy relationships, but I'm gonna keep that to myself and
I'll tell you in the break.
Okay, very good. And remind you that you can catch past episodes of Manage Your Damn Money on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. And please leave us a review on any of those platforms. That helps more people catch the show. If you have a question or topic you want us to cover, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. You can always catch us on Instagram and Twitter. My handle's @MYDM1. Malcolm, what's yours?
@Malcolm on Money.
You can always catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney. This is MYDM with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money, where today's conversation at hand, Malcolm, is an interesting one, and one I don't think we've covered. On our show, we specialize in exploring the lives of our generational cohort. We call them by their name, millennials, but there's another generation sneaking up behind our fast aging demographic who also has a name and their own prospects to face when it comes to financial well-being. They're called Generation Z. On this episode of Manage Your Damn Money, we will explore some of the generation-specific issues facing the new kid on the block of generations and how they are defining their financial success by answering the question, what Generation Z wants, Malcolm? So there's a couple movies like What Women Want and What Men Want. I think one of them was like a Steve Harvey influence movie. So that's what
It might have been even Tyler Perry. I don't remember.
Yeah, anyway, this was a little play on one of those movies. But in your mind, Malcolm, how do you define who a member of Generation Z is?
Anybody who listens to music that I don't understand. You know that yah music? Anybody who listens to that.
Music.
You know what yah music is.
You're gonna have to go ahead and define that.
Nah, you know what it is.
What does it sound like?
It's music that, like, when they can't think of words to actually say in the song, they just yell yah, yah, like that music. Like, anybody who listens to that and that's like their favorite genre of music,
I feel like
that's
somebody
too young to be a millennial.
Definitely could have criticized us about like Soulja Boy music, like that.
Right.
Soulja
Boy was like the worst the world had to offer when we were in college, and I criticized him as such. Right.
Okay.
Like the lyrics had like 8 words and then a bunch of sounds.
Right.
Now there's no words at all, all sounds. So, like, you know, I thought, again, Migos was like as bad as it gets.
Nah, it gets
Nah,
worse.
they're really not that bad in comparison to a lot of the stuff that, like, I'm listening to the radio and I'm looking at my wife and I'm like, how old am I? Like, I have no idea what this young man just said, and I don't even want to know. Like, all he keeps saying is yah, yah, and I'm just like, nah, I'm okay. I'm okay where I am.
So either Generation Z is really young or we are really
Or I'm
old.
really, really old.
One or the other.
Or both.
But without any knowledge, can you guess any of the issues that they have concerns about at this particular moment in time?
Besides old people like me talking trash about their music?
Clearly.
You know what? I honestly think Gen Z has it so much better than we do. Like, to be completely frank about it, I think
Gen
by the
Z was
time,
who we thought we should have been.
Right, Gen Z is who we wish we were,
Right.
to some degree. I'm okay with not being addicted to social media and growing up through like the social media generation. So like our parents think of us as the tech-enabled generation, but we're really not.
Not really.
Like, we're basically cyborgs. Like, we remember what analog was like. We had VCRs in our homes and tapes that you had to pull out and flip them over to keep playing. So you have an appreciation for things where it's Bluetooth compatible and you don't actually have to like physically remove anything. All the music is streaming to you through Spotify and whatever. But there's a whole generation of people who will never know what it's like to have to type anything on a typewriter.
Right.
Or like everything they've ever owned had a touch screen on it.
Right.
So that's interesting to me, but then when I consider the trade-off is I have to have lived my entire life on the internet.
Right.
Like, all of my information since the time I was born basically was on the internet because my parents posted pictures of me from infancy, and then I was old enough to get my own Instagram page and started doing it myself.
Right.
You've never really had a private life.
Right.
That's one of the things that to me is like a real drawback to being a Gen Zer.
I think of Gen Z as people who walk into the room and it was gray area for a while, but there was a moment when the person in front of the room or on stage would reference the young people in the room, and I realized they weren't talking about me anymore.
That is so humbling.
Ain't it though?
That is so humbling.
There's a very distinct crossover point where when they say, all the young people in the room, and you're like, they're talking about me. And then at some point, I don't know what it was like, nah, they're not talking about me no more.
I'm not married. I don't have any kids.
Right.
I got to be the young people.
Clearly.
No, sir, you're just behind. that was the realization that hit me.
Indeed. Well, to be a little bit more specific than we've been over the last 3 minutes of a rant, Generation Z is financially better armed and better educated than millennials were at their age. And this is a February 2020 piece on MarketWatch.com by Jacob Passy. Hopefully this will offer some more insight into who they are. Generation Generation Z may have grown up during the Great Recession, but they're coming of age during a historically long economic expansion that is following their financial lives to start off on the right foot. Malcolm, to that I say, ain't that some mess?
So you mentioned about like being born in graduating college in the 2008 economic mess,
Which
right?
we basically did.
If you look at the flip side of that, folks that are graduating college today into the best employment cycle we've had in like recent history.
Right.
You know, we're at like 3.5% unemployment or something. At the time we were graduating from college, it was in the double digits.
Right.
So you compare that, like you're graduating at a time when we're at quote unquote full employment. Everybody's got a job that wants a job. Salaries are higher than they've ever been. Interest rates are lower than they've ever been. You can buy anything you want on credit and figure out how to pay for it later. The world is beautiful now when you're graduating from college, if you don't have student loan debts, because then you won't get married. But other than that, like the world is awesome if you're 22 graduating from college.
I see where this show is heading, and I'm not liking it, but we're going to keep driving and see where we end up. The story wanted to say a recent study from the credit bureau Transunion examines the credit profile of Generation Z, which it defines as those born in or after 1995. I think my sister was born in 96. Among those Gen Zers who have already, no, I'm lying, she was born in 93, my bad. Among those Gen Zers who have already reached adulthood in the U.S., 66% are already credit active, meaning they have some sort of loan product on the books. Taking on debt, whatever its form, isn't necessarily a good thing, but there's evidence that Gen Z is also having an easier time paying off debt than their millennials did at their age. Half of credit active Gen Zers consumers have a credit score in the prime rate of 661 or above, compared to 39% of millennials back when they entered adulthood. And additionally, Gen Z and millennials' preferences for the types of loans they take out in young adulthood have differed. Around 41% of credit-active Gen Zers have a credit card, compared with only 34% of millennials when they were the same age. Gen Z is also more likely than millennials to have an auto loan, 23% versus 16%, and a personal loan, 4% versus 3% at this age.
Because we didn't have jobs. Like, you gave all the statistics to prove basically what I just said was my hypothesis. You don't have a job, you can't have a credit score.
Right.
It's as simple as that. Like, we couldn't buy cars on credit, which frankly may not be such a bad thing, because if you think about the car you would have bought at 22 versus the car you would buy at 32,
that's true.
It probably is a lot more affordable to you now than it would have been then. So there may be some good to the fact that credit wasn't really available to us when we were young enough to not really care.
Right. So it's interesting though, because it's like we joked about us wanting to have been the Generation Z, so to speak, in terms of economic terms. What do you see as the hallmark differences between coming of age during the worst recession since the Great Depression versus one of the longest running economic expansions, our country has seen?
In a word, optimism.
Okay.
I think you come into the world, you come into adulthood with a different level of optimism than we did.
Yeah.
And I'm overgeneralizing in a way, but like a lot of people I know personally back then and now, more specifically, are pretty pessimistic about the world financially. Versus people who are 20, 22, 24 that look at the world a little bit differently, or a lot differently when it comes to their money.
Right. And we've talked about this on the show. Like, I don't remember what you were doing during that period of time in the 2008 recession, because we graduated in 2009. So that means I went to grad school, so I didn't come out and become an adult until 2010.
I went to work
the day
after graduation.
But to me, it's like what that element that we were in at that particular moment, how that has impressed or influenced our own experience in the way, and to your point, a little less optimistic, whereas someone stepping into, economic greatness, for lack of a better word, the difference that gives people advantages or not.
So like I said, though, I was blessed to have a job that I graduated to. So say I don't remember what the days were, but say I graduated on Friday, on Monday I had a job to go to.
Okay.
I had a lot of friends and classmates that for a year didn't have a job.
Yeah.
Some of that was, I kind of gave up looking.
Yeah.
And some of that was like, no, nobody will hire me because I only have a bachelor's degree.
Right.
And this person with a PhD is applying for the same job I am.
Right.
So there's some of that in there too.
Okay. And finally, before we go to our first, music break, what advantages should Generation Z be seeing that millennials were not afforded? Like just in hardcore terms, in terms of getting off to a better start out of the gate.
Well, I kind of laid them out in the very beginning, in the sense that like their employment prospects look a lot better than they did for us.
Right.
Like all of us old people in their way have a job right now.
Right.
And most of us are satisfied with the job we already have, so we're not competing with them for the jobs that are available, which means that it's much easier to get a job as a 22-year-old college graduate or even an 18-year-old high school graduate than it was 10 years ago, and presumably than it would be, if you were to have to worry about it 10 years from now. Because things kind of go in these waves. So I just think, taking advantage of the opportunities that exist right now at full employment is a huge deal, because getting set on your way means a lot.
And I think it means something to be able to start out the gate and not having to take steps back before you've even started the game, which is what a lot of folks of the millennial generation in particular were doing. So it's great that Generation Z will have a chance to kind of forego that experience. But I want to remind you can catch past episodes of Manage Your Damn Money on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. And please leave us a review on any of those platforms. It helps more people catch our show. And of course, if you have a question or topic you want us to cover, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. And of course, you can always catch us on social media, Twitter and Instagram. My handle's @MYDM1. Malcolm, what's yours?
@MalcolmOnMoney.
And you can always catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney. This is MYDM with Ben and Malcolm. We will be right back. Welcome back to Manage Your Damn Money, where today's conversation at hand is what Generation Z wants. And we're going to give you a little more information before Malcolm and I continue to lament not having been born 10 years later. Here's another story for this particular show. Here's what Gen Z actually wants in multifamily. This was a February 2020 piece on biznow.com by Dean Bowener. It reads, a generation of renters raised through the Great Recession, dwindling affordability, and the advent of social media is leading to a new and competing approaches to marketing housing. Generation Z, defined by the Pew Research Center as people born after 1996, is now entering traditional multifamily properties, multifamily being like apartments, bringing taste for smaller apartments, more practical amenities, and even influencers with them. Person quoted for the article says, Gen Z is typically a lot more risk averse when it comes to finances, and it's less likely to spend money on luxury properties, to borrow money, and to exit school with a lot of debt, said a person quoted for the story. Therefore, they would trade off larger floor plans or luxury amenities in exchange for a more affordable residential experience, Malcolm. So this article kind of goes on.
So they're smarter than us, is what I'm hearing you say.
That's what that says. Do you see an uptick in the community space movement in apartments and housing being driven by Generation Z?
Well, yes, and I think it kind of goes back to the point I was making about like their entire life. They've been in this kind of oversharing, my word, oversharing mentality.
Sure.
Where the way you overshare on social media also happens to be the way you overshare in real life. All you really need is a room to yourself that you can lock the door and your little bit of worldly possessions is in there when you're not home. All the rest of the space can be shared common space and you're okay with that.
Right.
That was unthinkable to me at the time that I was like, if I'm gonna pay for an apartment.
That sounds like a college dormitory.
Right, it's a college dormitory.
Right.
It's gonna be my apartment.
Right.
Whereas the folks that you're talking about that they're working to build to accommodate now from an apartment living perspective are like, no, I don't mind shared spaces. You know, that's cool.
Yeah,
I'm used to it.
Definitely.
No, thank you.
I'm good money. Here's another particular story that we pulled for this show. Money stereotypes about Generation Z. This is an October 2019 piece on moneyunder30.com by Aja McClanahan. Generation Z wants to be Insta-famous. Ask a Generation Zer what they prefer, being an actor on a network TV series or a YouTuber with 1 million subscribers. Almost everyone you'd poll would prefer the latter. In fact, according to the Morning Consult survey, up to a quarter of Generation Z adults have aspirations to be famous, which kind of goes to that whole like Instagram, I don't even know what to call it.
Insta-famous.
Yeah.
That's a fear of mine though, that like raising kids in an era where Instagram, YouTube, those kind of things are the aspiration. And so becoming famous in that is what your life's goal is. That fewer people aspire to be things that we actually need in life, like doctors.
Right.
So great for the people that do decide to become doctors because they'll make $50 million a year. But terrible for the people who could have and would have had the aptitude to go in that direction because YouTube was more appealing.
Right. Also, the article says Generation Z thinks money grows on trees. For this generation,
Whose grandma wrote that?
I mean, it actually gives credit to a Generation Z. It says, this is almost true. Think about it. Extra money is never more than a few clicks and swipes away. You can download an app, post unwanted belongings, and get an offer to buy from a complete stranger in just minutes. So not literally money being made on trees, but like the notion that you can just do things online and somehow that will bring you income or pathways to income.
Is that meaningful money though?
I mean, we're not going to debate that. Just it's available.
I'm just saying, like if I sold a pair of shoes on whatever the site, I don't even know what these sites are because like, you know, I'm old. So if I sold a pair of shoes on one of these sites and I made $10, was that a meaningful amount of money that that grew on that tree?
There are people who run complete businesses and make decent income on these like, what am I thinking, like freelancer sites? So I'm thinking like in that way.
Okay, that's different.
Right, that's meaningful income. Then Generation Z doesn't know the value of money. While this generation is pretty young, they are still living in one of the most affluent times this world has ever seen. Things come to them relatively easily, and their time-pressed parents don't make it better with Uber Eats, Amazon purchases, and general purveyors' convenience. Gen Z is still learning the value of a dollar. It's just in a different way than previous generations, Malcolm. So I think it's funny because you mentioned this earlier. We can remember a time before the internet and applications on your phone. What does a tech ubiquitous experience have on our understanding of the dollar, particularly for Generation Z?
Yeah, so I mean, frankly, that's kind of my fear of Amazon taking over our lives, is the fact that like you're working just to earn enough money to have packages show up at your house every day after you get home from work and nothing else.
Right.
Like that seems to be literally where we're headed. Like I'm not even being facetious. Like folks want to have things so frequently, and Amazon has made it so easy for it to show up within a day now.
Right.
That really you're just working to spend as much of your paycheck as you possibly can on accumulating stuff off of Amazon's website. I even was watching a story on CNBC where they were trailing a lady who delivers for Amazon.
Oh my God.
And she was talking about how rough it is because she's picking up and carrying 50-pound boxes in some cases,
Right.
like from the fulfillment center to people's front door. She got attacked by somebody's dog a couple of times, like stuff like that. She doesn't have health care.
Right.
So she's just out there. And then at the end of it, they were like, so, you know, after your rent's paid and that kind of stuff, like you said, you don't really have much time to do anything else because you spend so much time delivering. Like, how do you get stuff done? And she was like, oh, I do it on Amazon. So you basically just gave it all to the government and Amazon.
Right.
And that's the only thing you wake up and go to sleep to do. That's so scary to me.
Yeah.
Like the world where Amazon owns everything.
Indeed, indeed. Well, also the last item that this particular article mentions, Generation Z is less concerned about debt. Generation Z isn't less concerned with debt, but they've learned from the mistakes millennials have made. Oh my. Did we show the pathway not to go? They already know that college doesn't have to be a part of their success story. Furthermore, should they decide to pursue college, they are already educated about the perils of too much student loan debt, and they carry the burden of making student loan payments monthly. For this reason, they can be more creative in how they'll pursue higher education. And this is a really poignant thing for me personally, because I know when I was coming up through high school, my attitude was, and I think it was a little bit prescriptive of our era, of when we were coming through school, it was achieve at all cost. Any and all costs. It didn't matter. You had to get the degree, you had to get the graduate degree.
Doesn't even matter what you major in, just graduate.
Has no bearing on the situation, right? And then, so that was my experience, and I have the student loans now to show it. And I remember meeting another young lady whose name is Erin. I think she's also in the personal finance space at like a speaking event that we were both at. And she talked about, in a very specific, different way, about how she got to the college she got to. And she explicitly decided on the front end that she was going to go to the less expensive, less known college so that she wouldn't have as many obligations on the back end. And now I feel like, just, you know, kind of being a consumer of information, I've seen where smart kids are saying, I'm going to do maybe, for instance, community college first for 2 years, and then transfer to a university maybe with a bigger name to save money there. People are making decisions that are a lot more thoughtful in terms of the cost than I think we even had an awareness of being available when we were coming up.
Well, I think a lot of that is probably a response to the noise that's been made over the last 15 years of what has happened to our generation.
Absolutely.
Where people are saying, like, you don't have to go down that road because here's what's at the end of it.
Yeah.
And there's folks like us, frankly, who are telling people who are considering going to college now, here's the experiences of myself, my peers, my classmates, everyone else that I've paid attention to. Here's how not to make these mistakes. But those weren't conversations that were being had as widely as they are now. Like, I can't open the Wall Street Journal without hearing some comparison about student loan debt and its impact on your future and how to consider the right college to go to. Take this test to determine what college to send your kids to, that kind of stuff. That didn't exist when we were like, but I will say though, the thing that I've observed from those like readings is that colleges are hurting really bad right now. Enrollment numbers are down significantly, but over the last 20 years, college tuition costs have gone up like 6% compounded every single year over the last 20 years. So at a time when enrollment is down, the cost, the tuition is going up, but they're not actually doing anything to address the thing that's got the enrollments down in the first place, which is the tuition. So they're doing things like offering all these wild amenities, like LSU, for example, installed a lazy river. So students in the middle of the quad, they now have a lazy river that you can come out on the green space and like tan and throw a frisbee and all that other crap. But they also have a lazy river that you can get into, and that's supposed to attract me on my college visit to come spend $60,000 a year to go to LSU. Why not just spend that money on subsidizing tuition so that I don't actually have to spend $60,000 and you can keep your lazy river? I can go to the pool down the street if I want to.
That's a new level of like ridiculous.
That's the one that sticks out to me from what I was reading about, like the crazy amenities that they're throwing in there. But there's a lot of those like that they're coming. Somebody has a zip line across their campus, like those kind of things, like to attract Gen Z in ways they weren't doing before.
So first question, it's like a two-part question kind of, but how do you see, generally speaking, and what would you say about generations and how they are defined by their experiences? at the outset or the beginning of their, I guess, adult experience?
Yeah, so the age that you come into adulthood has a huge impact on how you see the world, you know, from that point on. Like if you think about like, I think I do know actually how old your grandparents are, but like my grandparents were born during the Great Depression. And so that impacted for the rest of their lives the way they spent money and also the way they thought about risk. So everything was pay for it in cash, don't borrow anything, save it for a rainy day, don't spend on anything you don't absolutely have to have, all those kind of things. And that was their view of the world. Whereas we're talking about Gen Z, for example, who was born into a period in time where everything is great. Everybody who wants to borrow money, banks are willing to lend it to you. Everybody who wants a job has a job. So they don't really have those same kind of worries and constraints on spending and consuming. And so that's probably going to shape the way, unfortunately, that they see the rest of the world kind of to the extreme of those people who grew up in the Great Depression that are like, no, I'll just borrow. You know, I don't need the money today. I'll just borrow to do it. And then that gets bigger and bigger and bigger until...
You talked about our grandparents. I know Reverly Carter right now, if I open up her cupboard, there's some Spam in there right now.
Spam, peanut butter,
in
sardines,
this moment,
you know, the potted meat, canned meat type stuff.
Indeed.
It's hard to shake that.
It's hard to shake that. Indeed. Well, another question for you. If you had to guess, because for millennials, a hallmark of our experience is student loan debt and the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009. What is going to be the hallmark of Generation Z?
Besides Donald Trump?
Aside from him.
Because it's hard to forget that. Like 20, 30 years from now, they're still going to remember that.
Right.
But I think also credit card debt. The way we're talking now about student loan debt being the thing that keeps people from being able to progress into adulthood, I think credit card debt is going to be the thing that keeps Gen Z from being able to progress into adulthood, primarily because of the thing I mentioned before. The Trump administration, in all seriousness, dismantled the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in a way that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was there to protect us from predatory lending following the 2008 economic crisis. I would say it legitimately did its job for the last 10 years. It kept us from, you know, being a college student on campus where somebody came up to you and offered you a credit card with 25% interest in exchange for a t-shirt. That exists again now, even though it disappeared while we were on campus or while the people just behind us were on campus. And so I think that kind of stuff, the dependency that people currently have on debt is what's going to be the thing to cripple that generation the same way student loan debt was the thing that crippled ours.
I think something, as you spoke, something that rang a bell for me was the affordability crisis, so to speak, in housing right now, where people can't find relatively affordable places to live.
Yeah, that's another one.
How that could be generationally defining, because what's happening is people are moving back to the cities. A lot of the best jobs in terms of, you know, college educated are moving to these cities. It's difficult to find an affordable place to live in the city, and so on and so forth, and it just gets more and more complicated. That could be one issue and one thing that defines them. And then my final question before we close this show: what would be the outcome of having two generations next to one another that got off to such a different start? Maybe we just define what that looks like just now. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I can speak for both of us in saying that we're at least to some degree envious of the world that this generation is graduating into.
I was going to say that word.
And progressing into adulthood in. But time will tell whether that is warranted or not. We'll see what they do with that advantage.
Well, poignant way to end the show, Mr. Ethridge. I want to remind people you can catch past episodes of Manage Your Damn Money on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. Please leave us a rating on any of those platforms. That helps more people catch our show. And if you have a question or a topic you want us to cover, send it to us, info@manageyourdamnmoney.com. And of course, you can catch us on Instagram and Twitter. My handle's @MYDM1. Malcolm, what's yours?
@MalcolmOnMoney.
And you can catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/manageyourdamnmoney. Once again, thanks to our partners here at Montgomery Community Media for their amazing hospitality. Thanks to Generation Z for letting us use them as fodder for our discussion. Until next time, be good with your money.
Peace.
Peace.